Gilded chains. The last note from Elise Novak's violin hung in the air of the small performance hall, trembling with emotion before fading into silence. For those few precious moments on stage, she had forgotten everything: the mounting bills, her father's failing health, the collector's increasingly threatening calls. But as applause rippled through the modest audience, reality crashed back like a cruel wave. "Beautiful as always, darling," her father Victor wheezed when she rejoined him backstage. His once robust frame had withered from illness, but his eyes still sparkled with pride. "If only your mother could have heard you play tonight." Elise squeezed his hand, noticing how the skin stretched paper-thin over his knuckles. "Let's get you home. You shouldn't have come out in your condition. And miss my daughter's performance? Never." His attempt at a laugh dissolved into a coughing fit. Back in their small apartment, Elise helped her father to bed before confronting the stack of bills on the kitchen table. Medical expenses, mortgage payments, student loans for her conservatory education, all overdue. She'd taken every gig she could find, from teaching neighborhood children to playing at weddings, but it wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. The knock at the door came just after midnight. Elise opened it to find Mr. Holloway, her father's business partner from the days before their manufacturing company collapsed. "I apologize for the hour," he said, stepping inside without invitation. "But there's something you need to know. Your father's asked me not to tell you, but—" He lowered his voice. "He's made an arrangement." "What kind of arrangement?" Elise asked, dread pooling in her stomach. "With Jonathan Blackwood." The name hit her like a physical blow. Jonathan Blackwood, the 35-year-old tech billionaire whose company had bought out dozens of struggling businesses in the region, including, indirectly, her father's. His face occasionally appeared in business magazines. Always stern, always calculating. "What does Jonathan Blackwood want with us?" she asked, though something in her already knew. "Not with you both. With you." Mr. Holloway couldn't meet her eyes. "Your father approached him about a personal loan." Blackwood refused, but made a counter-offer. "He's seeking a wife, someone cultured, presentable. He's willing to assume all your father's debts and provide for his medical care." Elise felt as though the floor had dropped from beneath her feet. "My father is selling me?" "He prefers to think of it as securing your future. The agreement includes provisions for you, education, career opportunities." "How generous," she spat, tears burning behind her eyes. "And if I refuse?" Mr. Holloway's silence was answer enough. The next morning, Elise confronted her father, finding him hunched over his medication. "How could you?" she demanded, voice breaking. "How could you arrange my life away without even telling me?" "Elise, please," he reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "I'm not a possession to be traded." "You think I don't know that?" His voice rose briefly before dissolving into coughs. When he recovered, tears streamed down his hollow cheeks. "I've failed you as a father. I built a business that crumbled. I got sick when you needed me strong. Everything I've touched has turned to dust except you. You're the one beautiful thing I've created in this world. So you're giving me away? I'm giving you a chance." He clutched her hands desperately. "Jonathan Blackwood can offer you security I never could. Your music, your dreams, you can pursue them without worry." "As what?" "His trophy. As his partner. He admired your performance at the charity concert last winter. He spoke of your talent with genuine appreciation." The charity concert? Elise vaguely remembered seeing a somber man in an impeccable suit who'd watched her with unusual intensity. She'd thought him just another wealthy patron. 1 week later, she found herself in Jonathan Blackwood's downtown penthouse, face to face with her future husband. Tall and imposing, with dark hair silvering at the temples and penetrating gray eyes, he studied her with unsettling focus. "I won't pretend this is a love match," he said after offering her tea. "But I respect you, Ms. Novak, and I believe we can build something mutually beneficial." "Beneficial?" Elise echoed, clutching her untouched teacup. "You're buying a wife." "I'm proposing a partnership," he corrected calmly. "Your father's medical bills will be covered in full, your conservatory tuition paid, and you'll want for nothing, except freedom." Something flickered across his face. Not anger, but perhaps understanding. "I'm not looking for a prisoner, Elise. All I ask is your presence at certain social functions, a year of marriage before any divorce considerations, and discretion." Elise stared out at the city sprawled below his windows. Somewhere in that landscape was the hospital where her father would receive the treatment he desperately needed. The conservatory where she could continue her studies without financial strain. "And what do you get from this arrangement?" she asked quietly. Jonathan set down his cup. "A respectable marriage to quell rumors and speculation about my personal life. A partner for business functions. Perhaps eventually companionship." The word hung between them. Companionship, not love, not passion. Just the presence of another human being in his carefully ordered world. "Do we have an agreement?" he asked. Elise looked at her hands, a musician's hands, meant for creating beauty, now negotiating her own worth. "Yes," she whispered, feeling the golden chains of obligation close around her. "We have an agreement." Silent symphony. The wedding was a tasteful affair, if one could call such a transaction tasteful. Only a handful of witnesses attended the courthouse ceremony, followed by a small reception at Jonathan's penthouse. Elise wore a simple ivory dress that Jonathan's assistant had selected, while he donned one of his countless charcoal suits. They exchanged plain gold bands and impersonal vows, their voices echoing hollowly in the sterile government building. No one mentioned love. No one expected it. Victor Novak watched from his wheelchair, relief and guilt battling across his gaunt face. When he embraced his daughter afterward, he whispered, "Forgive me," so quietly that only she could hear. "There's nothing to forgive," Elise lied, kissing his forehead. "You'll get better now." Jonathan had arranged for Victor's transfer to a private medical facility the very next day. The doctors there spoke of treatments and specialists previously beyond their financial reach. For the first time in months, Elise saw hope flicker in her father's eyes, and for that alone, she could almost convince herself this bargain was worthwhile. After the reception, Jonathan showed Elise to her rooms in his spacious penthouse, a bedroom, sitting area, and adjoining bathroom, all decorated in tasteful neutrals. "I hope you'll be comfortable here," he said, standing awkwardly at the threshold. "My suite is at the opposite end of the hallway. You'll have your privacy." Elise glanced at him, surprised. "We won't be sharing a room?" "This isn't that kind of arrangement," Jonathan replied, his expression unreadable. "Unless you prefer otherwise." "No," she said quickly. "This is fine." "Good." He cleared his throat. "I've taken the liberty of having your violin and personal effects brought over. If you need anything else, Mrs. Winters, my housekeeper can assist you." With that, he left her alone in her gilded cage. The first weeks of their marriage unfolded in a strange, silent choreography. Jonathan left early each morning for his downtown office, returning late most evenings. Elise divided her time between visiting her father, attending her conservatory classes, now fully paid for, and practicing her violin in the small music room Jonathan had converted from a guest bedroom. They rarely spoke beyond polite pleasantries over the occasional shared meal. Elise learned about her husband not through conversation but through observation. The way he took his coffee black, how he read financial news with breakfast but poetry before bed, his habit of loosening his tie the moment he entered the penthouse. She expected to feel like an intruder, yet somehow the space accommodated them both, two solitary planets orbiting without collision. One evening, nearly a month into their arrangement, Elise was practicing a particularly difficult passage from Mendelssohn when she sensed a presence. She turned to find Jonathan standing in the doorway watching. "Don't stop on my account," he said. "How long have you been there?" She lowered her bow. "Not long." A pause. "You play beautifully." "Thank you." Elise fidgeted with her bow. "My mother taught me before she died." Jonathan nodded, then seemed to hesitate. "I have tickets for the symphony this weekend. Tchaikovsky's Violin Concerto. Would you care to join me?" The invitation startled her. "I thought you only needed me for business functions." "I enjoy classical music," he replied simply, "and I thought you might appreciate it professionally." Elise studied him, trying to discern his motives. Was this part of their bargain? Being paraded as his wife at cultural events? Or was it something else? "Yes," she finally said. "I'd like that." The symphony proved to be the first breach in their carefully maintained distance. Seated side by side in the darkened concert hall, they shared a moment of genuine connection when the violin soloist delivered a particularly moving cadenza. Elise, transported by the music, unconsciously reached for Jonathan's hand. He seemed startled but didn't pull away. Afterward, over late dinner at an elegant restaurant, conversation flowed more easily than ever before. What drew you to the violin? Jonathan asked as their entrees arrived. The way it can sound so human, Elise replied. Like it's singing or crying or laughing. No other instrument comes so close to the human voice. Jonathan nodded thoughtfully. I've always envied people with artistic talents. The ability to create beauty seems far more valuable than what I do. And what is it you do exactly? Elise realized she knew remarkably little about her husband's work, beyond the vague understanding that he ran a successful tech company. A small smile touched his lips. Currently, I build systems that help medical researchers analyze data patterns too complex for human observation. Before that, I developed software that makes renewable energy grids more efficient. That sounds meaningful, Elise said, surprised. It pays well, he replied with a self-deprecating shrug. The meaning is secondary for most investors. Later that night, as Jonathan walked her to her door, Elise found herself genuinely curious about the man she'd married. Why did you agree to my father's proposal? She asked suddenly. You could have any woman you wanted. Jonathan considered her question carefully. Most women I meet want something from me. My money, my connections, my status. You're the first who clearly doesn't want to be here at all. His eyes met hers. I find your honesty refreshing. Before she could respond, he wished her good night and walked away. The following week brought unexpected turbulence when Elise arrived home to find a sleek, midnight blue grand piano installed in the music room. What is this? She demanded when Jonathan returned. A piano, he replied mildly. I can see that. Why is it here? I noticed you sometimes compose working out harmonies on your phone's keyboard app. I thought a proper instrument might be helpful. Elise stared at him, disoriented by his attentiveness. You've been watching me. Observing, he corrected. There's a difference. And what else have you observed? That you take your coffee with 2 sugars but tea with honey. That you read music biographies and historical fiction. That you stand on the balcony every night before bed regardless of the weather. He delivered these observations without inflection, as if reciting simple facts. So I'm a specimen to be studied? Elise felt exposed, vulnerable. No. Jonathan stepped closer, his expression softening slightly. You're my wife. I'm trying to know you. The simple statement hung between them, laden with implications neither was prepared to explore. That night, for the first time, Elise sat at the piano. Her fingers moved tentatively at first, then with growing confidence as she worked through a melody that had been forming in her mind for weeks. She didn't notice Jonathan watching from the hallway, didn't see the way his expression changed as her music filled the space between them. A wordless communication more honest than anything they'd spoken aloud. 2 months into their marriage, they attended their first business function together, a charity gala hosted by Jonathan's company. Elise wore a floor-length emerald gown that complemented her auburn hair, while Jonathan looked characteristically immaculate in his tuxedo. Just smile and be yourself, he advised as they entered the ballroom. These people care more about appearances than substance. Throughout the evening, Elise observed Jonathan in his professional element, commanding, confident, yet somehow removed from the sycophants who surrounded him. She noticed how he deflected personal questions, how he steered conversations toward substantive topics rather than idle gossip. Your husband is not what I expected, remarked an elegant older woman who introduced herself as Jonathan's former mentor. When he announced his sudden marriage, we all assumed it was some calculated business move. Wasn't it? Elise asked before she could stop herself. The woman studied her with shrewd eyes. Jonathan doesn't do anything without purpose. But I've known him for 20 years and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you when you're not watching. Later, as they slow danced for appearance's sake, Elise found herself hyper-aware of Jonathan's hand at her waist, the subtle scent of his cologne, the strange intimacy of moving in synchrony with a man who was both her husband and a stranger. You're trembling, he observed quietly. I'm not used to this, she admitted. Any of it. Neither am I. His admission surprised her. Despite what everyone here thinks, I've never been very good at personal connections. As the music swelled around them, Elise realized they were engaged in another kind of performance, a silent symphony of glances and careful touches, of boundaries tested and maintained. A dance far more complex than the simple waltz their bodies executed, and somewhere beneath her determination to remain emotionally distant, a treacherous thought formed. What if this arrangement, begun as a transaction, could evolve into something neither of them had anticipated? Crescendo of trust. The first real crack in Elise's carefully constructed walls appeared on a rainy Tuesday, 4 months into their marriage. She'd spent the afternoon at her father's medical facility, where the doctors had delivered devastating news. Despite the advanced treatments, Victor's condition was deteriorating. The aggressive therapy that had initially shown promise was now failing him. When she returned to the penthouse soaked from the downpour and hollowed by grief, she found Jonathan working in his home office. He looked up as she passed his open door, his expression shifting instantly from concentration to concern. Elise, what happened? She hadn't intended to tell him, had planned to retreat to her rooms and process her pain in private. But something in his voice, the genuine worry there, unraveled her composure. It's my father, she said, voice breaking. The treatments aren't working anymore. They're talking about comfort measures. She didn't expect Jonathan to rise from his desk, didn't expect him to approach her with such gentle purpose. When he hesitantly opened his arms, she surprised herself by stepping into his embrace, her tears soaking the expensive fabric of his shirt. I'm sorry, he murmured, one hand cradling the back of her head. Tell me what you need. What she needed was impossible, a miracle cure, more time, a different reality altogether. But in that moment, being held by someone who asked for nothing in return felt like its own small salvation. Just this, she whispered, just for a minute. That minute stretched longer than either anticipated. When Elise finally pulled away, embarrassed by her vulnerability, Jonathan didn't retreat to his usual emotional distance. I'll make some calls, he said, brushing a strand of damp hair from her face. There's a specialist in cellular regeneration therapy I've been funding through my company's medical research division. Your father might qualify for his experimental program. You'd do that? Elise searched his face, finding no calculation there. Only determination, of course, he said it simply, as if helping her father were the most natural thing in the world. Within days, Victor was transferred to a cutting-edge research facility across the city. The new treatment protocol was aggressive and experimental, but within weeks his doctors reported cautious optimism. Though recovery wasn't guaranteed, he'd been granted a fighting chance. Watching Jonathan interact with her father's medical team, advocating tirelessly for the best care, Elise glimpsed a side of him she'd never anticipated. A man who wielded his power and influence not for personal gain, but to genuinely help others. Why are you doing all this? She asked one evening as they drove home from the hospital. It wasn't part of our arrangement. Jonathan kept his eyes on the rain-slicked road. Not everything is transactional, Elise. In my experience with wealthy men, everything is. He glanced at her then, something vulnerable flickering across his face. Perhaps I'm trying to prove that assumption wrong. The shift between them was subtle but unmistakable. Their carefully choreographed routine of polite distance began to dissolve, replaced by something more authentic. They still maintained separate bedrooms, still honored the boundaries of their unusual arrangement, but meals were shared more regularly. Conversations extended beyond pleasantries, and music often filled the penthouse in the evenings. One night, Elise found Jonathan in the music room, standing before her violin with a contemplative expression. I've always wondered what it feels like, he said when he noticed her watching, to create music. Would you like me to teach you? The offer surprised them both. That evening became the first of many impromptu lessons. Jonathan proved to be a dedicated, if initially awkward student, approaching the violin with the same focused intensity he brought to his business endeavors. Elise discovered she enjoyed teaching, particularly someone who approached music with such earnest curiosity rather than technical proficiency. My father wanted me to become an engineer, Jonathan confessed during one session, attempting a simple scale. Music, art, these were frivolous pursuits in his estimation. And yet you surround yourself with art, Elise observed, noting the carefully curated paintings that adorned his walls, perhaps in rebellion. His fingers fumbled on the strings, or perhaps in recognition of what I missed. The violin lessons created an unexpected intimacy between them, the necessary adjustments to his posture, the guiding of his hands, the shared frustration and occasional triumph. For the first time, Elise found herself genuinely laughing with Jonathan when he produced a particularly screeching note. I think Mozart's legacy is safe from me, he deadpanned, setting the instrument aside. Mozart began as a beginner too, she reminded him. Everyone does. Jonathan studied her with unusual intensity. What about you? What dreams did you have before all this? The question caught her off guard. I wanted to play with a major orchestra, or perhaps form a chamber group. I used to fantasize about touring, performing in the great concert halls. She shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. Childish dreams. Why childish? Because reality intervened. My mother died. My father got sick. Our money disappeared. And now? Jonathan pressed. What's stopping you now? The question lingered between them unanswered. The following week, Elise received an invitation to audition for a prestigious chamber ensemble. When she confronted Jonathan about his obvious involvement, he seemed genuinely perplexed by her anger. I merely mentioned your name to the director when we spoke at the symphony fundraiser. The audition invitation came because of your talent, not my influence. You had no right to interfere in my career, she insisted. I didn't interfere. I created an opportunity. There's a difference. His voice remained calm despite her agitation. The choice to pursue it remains entirely yours. Elise stormed away, conflicted. Part of her resented his presumption, yet another part recognized the truth in his words. For so long, her musical ambitions had been subordinated to survival. Now, with her father's care secured and financial pressures alleviated, what was truly holding her back? After days of internal debate, she decided to audition. The preparation consumed her. Hours spent refining technically challenging passages until her fingers cramped and her shoulder ached. Jonathan gave her space but made small, thoughtful gestures, leaving cups of tea outside the music room, ensuring the penthouse remained quiet during her practice sessions, once even scheduling a massage therapist to help with her tense muscles. The morning of the audition, she found a small package outside her bedroom door. Inside was an exquisite vintage rosin case with a simple note, "For luck, though you won't need it." The audition went remarkably well. The chamber group's director praised her technical precision and emotional expressivity, inviting her to join them for a series of concerts before making a final decision on permanent membership. The opportunity was everything she'd dreamed of, and terrifying in its implications. That evening, she found Jonathan in his study, working late as usual. I got in, she announced from the doorway. A trial period, at least. He looked up, genuine pleasure warming his usually reserved expression. Congratulations. When do you start? Next month. We'll be performing across the Northeast. She hesitated. I'll be traveling quite a bit. I assumed you would be. He set his work aside. Will that be a problem? Won't it be? For our arrangement? Jonathan studied her for a long moment. Our arrangement was never meant to cage you, Elise. Your career, your ambitions, they're part of who you are. But you paid for a wife. Someone to attend functions, maintain appearances. I married a musician. He corrected gently. Did you think I expected you to abandon that? Something warm and unfamiliar bloomed in Elise's chest. I don't know what I thought. To celebrate her acceptance, Jonathan suggested dinner at an intimate restaurant overlooking the city. The evening felt different from their previous outings, more like a genuine date than an obligation. Elise found herself sharing stories of her childhood, her mother's influence on her musical development, her dreams beyond performing. I'd like to establish a music program for children in underserved communities, she confessed over dessert, like the one that saved me after my mother died. When everything else fell apart, music remained constant. That's a worthy ambition, Jonathan said thoughtfully. Have you considered establishing a foundation? Those require money, Elise pointed out, something I happen to have in abundance. He smiled slightly. Perhaps we could discuss a proper endowment. Why would you do that? Jonathan's expression grew serious. Because it matters to you, and because you've begun to matter to me in ways I didn't anticipate. The admission hung between them, fragile and momentous. Later, as they walked along the moonlit river near their building, Elise found herself studying her husband's profile. In the silvery light, he looked younger, less guarded than the stern businessman the world knew. When we first met, she said quietly, I thought you were cold calculating. Most people do. What changed you? Jonathan's step slowed. Nothing changed me, Elise. You simply began to see more of who I already was. On impulse, she reached for his hand. His fingers entwined with hers, warm and secure. "I think I'm beginning to," she whispered. That night, standing at her bedroom door, the usual awkward moment of parting felt charged with new significance. Jonathan's eyes held a question he wouldn't voice, respecting the boundaries they'd established. Elise found herself rising on tiptoe, pressing a gentle kiss to his cheek. "Thank you," she murmured, "for everything." He caught her hand as she turned to go, his thumb tracing a soft circle on her palm. "Sleep well, Elise." As she closed her door, Elise leaned against it, heart racing with the unsettling realization that somewhere between obligation and gratitude, between arrangement and authenticity, she'd begun to feel something dangerously close to affection for the man she'd married. And judging by the lingering warmth of his touch, perhaps she wasn't alone in that unexpected journey. Dissonant choices. The chamber ensemble's first tour exceeded all of Elise's expectations. From Boston's elegant symphony hall to Philadelphia's historic Academy of Music, each venue brought new challenges and triumphs. Performing with musicians of such caliber pushed her technically and artistically, drawing out nuances in her playing she hadn't known she possessed. For the first time since her mother's death, music became pure joy again rather than an escape or obligation. She and Jonathan adapted to a new rhythm in their relationship. Frequent video calls, messages throughout the day, his surprise appearances at her performances when his schedule allowed. The distance, rather than creating disconnect, seemed to accelerate their growing closeness. Without the daily reminders of their unusual beginning, conversation flowed more naturally, focusing on their genuine interests rather than the circumstances that had brought them together. "You play differently now," Jonathan observed after attending her Philadelphia concert. They walked through Rittenhouse Square, the late spring evening perfumed with flowering trees. "More boldly, do I?" Elise tucked her arm through his, a gesture that had become natural over the past months. "It's as if you've shed something that was weighing you down." His eyes studied her face. "You're luminous on stage." The quiet admiration in his voice warmed her more than she wanted to admit. By the tour's conclusion, the ensemble's director offered Elise a permanent position. The official announcement would come after their summer break, with a more ambitious international tour planned for the fall. Europe, Asia, possibly Australia. Elise explained over dinner in the penthouse on her first night home. "We'd be gone nearly 6 months." Jonathan nodded thoughtfully, refilling her wine glass. "That's a remarkable opportunity." "It means significant time away," she continued, studying his reaction. "From here? From you?" "I have business interests in most major cities," he said carefully. "We could arrange to meet periodically. Would you want to?" His eyes met hers. "Very much." The admission hung between them, charged with implications neither had fully voiced. Their marriage, begun as a business arrangement, had evolved into something neither had anticipated, a partnership of mutual respect, genuine affection, and an increasingly undeniable attraction. That night, for the first time, Elise hesitated outside her bedroom door, wondering what might happen if she turned toward Jonathan's suite instead. Something in his gaze suggested he was thinking the same, but true to his word, he respected her space, kissing her hand before retreating to his own rooms. The delicate balance they'd established was upended 3 weeks later when Elise received an unexpected offer, a prestigious solo residency with the National Symphony. The opportunity included commissioned work specifically for her, collaborative projects with renowned composers, and nationwide exposure. It was the kind of career-defining offer most musicians only dreamed about. It was also incompatible with the chamber ensemble's international tour. "I don't know what to do," she confessed to Jonathan, pacing their living room. "The ensemble has already announced the tour. I'd be leaving them short-handed if I backed out now." "But the residency is your dream," he noted, "a platform for your own artistic vision rather than interpreting others." "Yes, but—" she hesitated. "It would mean staying here, not traveling." The implication hung between them, unspoken but understood. Choosing the residency meant choosing a life where Jonathan featured prominently. Choosing the tour meant embracing independence, the path she'd envisioned before their arrangement changed everything. "This isn't a decision I can make for you," Jonathan said quietly. "Nor should my presence or absence in your life be the determining factor." "Isn't it, though?" Elise stopped pacing to face him. If not for our marriage, this wouldn't even be a question. I'd take the tour. A shadow crossed his face. Then perhaps you have your answer. Before she could respond, his phone rang. An emergency at one of his company's research facilities requiring his immediate attention. The conversation was left unfinished, the tension between them unresolved. That same week, Victor suffered a serious setback. Despite the experimental treatments, his body was failing. The doctors gave him weeks, perhaps only days. Elise moved temporarily into the medical facility, spending every possible moment at her father's bedside. Jonathan arranged for the best hospice care, ensuring Victor's comfort while giving Elise and her father privacy for their final conversations. "I've made so many mistakes," Victor told her one evening, his voice barely above a whisper. "The worst was trying to buy your happiness with someone else's fortune." "Don't, Papa," Elise soothed, holding his fragile hand. "That's all behind us now, is it?" His rheumy eyes studied her face. "Tell me truthfully, Elise, are you happy with him?" The question caught her off guard. Was she happy? The answer wasn't simple. Her relationship with Jonathan had evolved beyond anything she could have imagined, filled with respect, intellectual connection, and growing tenderness. Yet they remained in a curious limbo, more than business partners but less than true lovers, constrained by the unusual circumstances of their beginning. "I don't know what I am," she admitted finally. "But I'm not unhappy." Victor nodded slowly. "I've watched him with you. The way he looks at you when he thinks no one notices." He squeezed her fingers weakly. "That man loves you, Elise, not as a possession, not as an obligation. He loves you as I loved your mother, completely. You can't know that. I'm dying, darling." It clarifies one's perceptions. A ghost of his old smile touched his lips. "The question is, what do you feel for him?" Elise couldn't answer, the truth too complicated and frightening to voice. Victor passed peacefully 3 days later, Jonathan at Elise's side as she said her final goodbye. At the small private funeral, he remained a steady presence, handling arrangements with quiet efficiency while giving her space to grieve. That night, alone in the penthouse, Elise found herself drawn to the piano Jonathan had given her. Her fingers moved instinctively over the keys, finding a melody she hadn't known was within her, something sorrowful yet strangely hopeful, a musical narrative of loss and unexpected connection. She didn't hear Jonathan enter, didn't realize he was listening until she finished playing and looked up to find him watching from the doorway, eyes suspiciously bright. "That was beautiful," he said softly. "What is it?" "Nothing, something." She shrugged helplessly. "Just feelings without words." He crossed to sit beside her on the bench, close but not touching. "You should record it. Develop it further. Perhaps." She studied his profile. "It made me think about choices. How sometimes the path you fight against leads you exactly where you need to be." Jonathan turned to face her. "Elise, about the residency and the tour. I've decided to decline both," she interrupted. "What? Why?" "My father's death has made me reevaluate what matters." Her fingers brushed the piano keys without pressing them. "I want to establish that music foundation we discussed. Create something meaningful from his loss." "You can do that and still perform," Jonathan argued. "Your talent will still be there," she finished. "But right now, I need purpose more than applause." Jonathan was silent for a long moment. "I don't want to be the reason you abandon your dreams." "You're not." Elise met his gaze directly. "But you have become part of those dreams in ways I never expected." Something shifted in his expression. Hope, perhaps, or relief. Before he could respond, his phone chimed with an urgent message. "It's Blackwood Technologies in Singapore," he said apologetically after checking the screen. "There's a situation with the neural interface project." "Go," Elise said. "We can talk tomorrow." But tomorrow brought complications of its own. The Singapore crisis required Jonathan's immediate presence, and what was meant to be a brief business trip extended into weeks as one problem cascaded into another. In his absence, Elise began preliminary work on her foundation, meeting with educational consultants and investigating potential locations in underserved neighborhoods. Yet without Jonathan, the penthouse felt strangely empty, their growing connection suspended in uncertainty. When the chamber ensemble's director called with an ultimatum about the international tour, commit now or be replaced, Elise found herself reconsidering her decision. Perhaps separation would provide clarity. Perhaps distance would reveal whether what she felt for Jonathan was genuine attachment or merely gratitude and circumstance. Meanwhile, the National Symphony increased pressure about the residency, needing her final answer. Both opportunities required immediate decisions. Both represented divergent paths for her future. Late one night, struggling with indecision, Elise discovered a folder on Jonathan's desk labeled with her name. Inside were detailed plans for a state-of-the-art music education center, complete with architectural renderings, budget projections, and a list of potential corporate sponsors, all compiled before she'd even mentioned her foundation idea. He had been planning this gift for months, anticipating her dream before she'd fully articulated it. Attached was a handwritten note, "For when you're ready." No strings attached. The gesture overwhelmed her, not for its extravagance, but for what it revealed about Jonathan's understanding of her true desires. Unlike her father's well-intentioned but controlling sacrifices, Jonathan offered support without expectation, empowerment without obligation. That night, Elise made her decision. She called the ensemble director and declined the tour. Then she contacted the National Symphony and respectfully turned down the residency. Instead, she booked a flight to Singapore. The international journey gave her time to contemplate what she would say when she saw Jonathan. Their relationship had begun with a transaction, but had grown into something neither had bargained for. Now, standing at this crossroads, Elise recognized that the true choice wasn't between career paths but between fear and courage. The courage to acknowledge that against all odds and expectations, she had fallen in love with her husband. What she didn't know was whether Jonathan, despite his kindness and evident care, was prepared to transform their arrangement into something authentic and lasting, or whether the man who had bought a wife could truly accept being freely chosen. As her plane began its descent toward Singapore, Elise clutched the folder of foundation plans like a talisman, uncertain of her reception but finally clear about what her heart desired. Not a benefactor or a business partner, but a true companion with whom to build something meaningful and enduring. Harmonious hearts. Singapore greeted Elise with oppressive humidity and a kaleidoscope of lights reflecting across its harbor. Exhausted from 20 hours of travel yet too anxious to rest, she checked into her hotel and immediately messaged Jonathan. His response came within minutes. "I'm in meetings until late." "Tomorrow?" "No," she replied. "Tonight. Please." The address he sent led her to a sleek skyscraper in the financial district. Security escorted her to a conference room on the 42nd floor, where Jonathan was mid-negotiation with a team of engineers and investors. When he glanced up and saw her through the glass wall, the surprise on his face quickly transformed into something more complex. Confusion, concern, and unmistakable pleasure. He excused himself immediately, crossing to where she waited, Elise. Her name on his lips sounded like both a question and an answer. "What's happened? Is everything all right?" She looked at him properly then. The slight dishevelment of his usually impeccable appearance, the shadows beneath his eyes suggesting sleepless nights, the genuine worry in his expression. This man who had entered her life as a business proposition had somehow become essential to her happiness. "Nothing's wrong," she assured him, "but I needed to see you, to tell you something that couldn't wait." Jonathan glanced back at the conference room where his team watched with undisguised curiosity. "Give me 30 minutes to conclude this meeting." Those 30 minutes stretched into an eternity as Elise paced the empty office he'd offered. The folder containing his plans for her music foundation lay on a side table, a tangible reminder of why she'd come halfway around the world. When Jonathan finally returned, he'd shed his suit jacket and loosened his tie. "I'm sorry about that. We're dealing with a critical software integration issue." He hesitated, studying her face. "You've come a long way to tell me something." Elise took a deep breath. "I found the plans for the music center." His expression shifted slightly. I'd planned to show you when the preliminary designs were finalized." "Why didn't you tell me you were already working on this?" "Because I wanted it to be your project, not mine." He moved to the window, looking out at the glittering cityscape. "If I'd presented completed plans, you might have felt obligated to accept my vision rather than creating your own." "That consideration?" Elise moved to stand beside him. "That respect for my autonomy, it's what I've come to tell you about." Jonathan turned to face her, waiting. "I've declined both the residency and the tour," she said, "because of your father's passing." Partly, she gathered her courage, but mostly because neither path would lead me where I truly want to be. "And where is that?" His voice was carefully neutral. "With you." The words emerged with surprising ease, not because of our arrangement, not out of gratitude or obligation, but because somewhere between our wedding and today, I fell in love with you. Jonathan went very still, his expression unreadable. "Elise, please let me finish." She pressed on, needing to say everything before her courage failed. "Our marriage began as a transaction, but it's evolved into something real, at least for me. I don't know if you feel the same, and I'll understand if you don't. But I couldn't make decisions about my future without being honest about what I want that future to include." For a breathless moment, Jonathan simply looked at her, his composure finally cracking to reveal raw emotion. Then he closed the distance between them, cradling her face in his hands with exquisite tenderness. "Do you know why I agreed to your father's proposal?" he asked quietly. "Not because I wanted a convenient wife or a social accessory. It was because I saw you perform at that charity concert and couldn't look away. Your music spoke directly to something in me I thought had died years ago." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "I told myself it was admiration for your talent, then respect for your determination, then appreciation for your kindness. I created 1,000 justifications to avoid the simple truth. I was falling in love with you from the very beginning. Why didn't you say anything?" "How could I?" A rueful smile touched his lips. "I'd essentially purchased your presence in my life. Any declaration would have seemed coercive, another obligation in an arrangement where you had little choice. I promised myself I would never pressure you, never make you feel that your freedom depended on reciprocating feelings I had no right to expect." Elise shook her head in wonder. "So we've both been hiding the same truth." "It appears so. What happens now?" she whispered. In answer, Jonathan lowered his lips to hers, their first real kiss, gentle yet charged with months of unspoken longing. When they finally parted, both were trembling slightly. "Now," he said, "we begin again, not as a business arrangement but as partners who choose each other freely." That night they talked for hours in Jonathan's hotel suite, reimagining their future together. Elise shared her vision for the Music Foundation, not just teaching children to play instruments but using music as therapy, as community building, as a bridge between cultures and generations. "I want to start in my old neighborhood," she explained, curled beside him on the sofa, "where resources are scarce but talent and potential are abundant." "We could expand internationally eventually," Jonathan suggested, his business mind engaging with her passion. "Singapore has some remarkable community music programs we could learn from." "We," Elise repeated, savoring the word. "I like the sound of that. I do too." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "But your performing career, I don't want you to abandon that completely." "I won't," she assured him. "But I'm thinking differently about it now. Guest appearances, benefit concerts, teaching master classes, using my music in service of something larger than personal ambition." As dawn broke over Singapore's skyline, they finally fell asleep in each other's arms, not as husband and wife in name only, but as true partners at last. The next 6 months transformed both their lives. Jonathan restructured his business commitments to allow more time for their shared projects. Together, they converted an abandoned community center in Elise's childhood neighborhood into the first Novak Blackwood Music Academy, offering free instruction to children who would otherwise never access such opportunities. Elise divided her time between teaching, performing benefit concerts, and developing the academy's curriculum. She discovered a gift for nurturing young talent, particularly children who, like her, used music to navigate difficult circumstances. "You found your true calling," Jonathan observed after watching her coach a particularly withdrawn 7-year-old through her first successful recital piece. "One of them," Elise corrected, leaning into his embrace. "The other is being your partner." Their first anniversary arrived with little resemblance to the somber occasion that had united them. Instead of a sterile courthouse ceremony, they held a private vow renewal on the academy's rooftop garden, surrounded by students, teachers, and the few close friends who had supported their unconventional journey. This time, Their vows contained no contractual language, no careful stipulations about expectations and obligations. Instead, they spoke from the heart about the unexpected gift they'd found in each other, how circumstances designed to constrain had ultimately freed them to discover genuine connection. "When I married you," Elise said, holding Jonathan's hands as the setting sun bathed them in golden light, "I thought I was sacrificing my freedom for security. I never imagined that through you I would find both, the security to pursue my dreams and the freedom to love without fear." Jonathan's response came with uncharacteristic emotion, his usual composure softened by evident joy. "You entered my life as an arrangement but transformed it into something authentic and precious. Before you I had success but no real purpose. You've taught me that true wealth lies not in what we possess but in what we build together." Later that evening, as they danced alone on the rooftop under stars and string lights, Elise noticed a manila envelope on the table beside their anniversary cake. "What's this?" she asked. Jonathan's smile held a hint of mischief. "Open it." Inside was their original marriage contract with all its careful clauses and conditions. Across it, in bold red ink, was stamped, "Fulfilled and superseded." Attached was a new document, the deed to the Music Academy, placed in a trust they would oversee together. "I thought it fitting," Jonathan explained, "to replace our business arrangement with a different kind of partnership, one dedicated to creating opportunity rather than obligation." Elise traced the document with wondering fingers. "From transaction to transformation." "Precisely." He drew her closer. "Though I should warn you, this new arrangement is considerably less flexible than our original contract." "Oh?" She raised an eyebrow. "How so?" "It's permanent," he murmured against her hair. "Non-negotiable, and based entirely on love rather than convenience." "Those terms are acceptable," Elise whispered, rising on tiptoe to seal their new agreement with a kiss. As music drifted up from the academy below, a student ensemble practicing for their first public performance, Elise reflected on the strange, winding path that had led her here. What had begun as her father's desperate bargain had evolved into something no fortune could have purchased, a partnership of equals, a shared purpose and a love born not from obligation but from genuine choice. The following spring, Elise discovered she was pregnant. Their daughter, born 9 months later, they named Victoria, in honor of Elise's father, whose desperate act had inadvertently given them the greatest gift of all, each other. When Victoria was old enough to ask how her parents met, they told her a carefully edited version of their story, emphasizing how sometimes life's most difficult circumstances can lead to unexpected joy. "So Grandpa Victor brought you together?" the child asked, wide-eyed at the bedtime tale. "In a way," Elise acknowledged, exchanging a knowing glance with Jonathan. "He created the opportunity, but we had to choose each other for ourselves. And that," Jonathan added, gathering his family close, "is the difference between an arrangement and a love story." As Victoria drifted to sleep between them, Elise reflected on how thoroughly her life had transformed. The golden chains she'd once resented had melted away, reforged into bonds far stronger and more precious. Bonds freely chosen, tenderly maintained, and infinitely more valuable than the fortune that had initially brought them together. In the quiet of their daughter's room, Jonathan's fingers found hers in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. "No regrets?" he whispered. Elise squeezed his hand, thinking of all they had built together and all that still lay ahead. The Academy's expansion, Victoria's future, their continuing journey from arrangement to authentic love. "Not one," she answered truthfully. "Some paths begin with difficult choices but lead exactly where we're meant to be." Outside their window, the city lights mirrored the stars above, countless points of brightness illuminating what had once been darkness. Much like their unexpected love story, Elise thought, a journey that had begun in shadow but emerged into light more brilliant than either could have imagined alone.